Okay, we want to take you back now to Nassau, Bahamas.
Local 10 News reporter Jenise Fernandez just landed there after being evacuated from Abaco Island and joins us live. Jenise, give us a little bit of a wrap up of how you got to where you are now.
Hey there, Nicole and Calvin. And to be honest with you, I'm still trying to catch my breath. It's been a whirlwind couple of days, but just to let you know how today went, we obviously woke up this morning, and if you could believe it, we were still feeling the impacts of Hurricane Dorian. As we've heard from our meteorologists, this storm has been such a slow mover, and it's been so intense, and it just pounded Marsh Harbour. So this morning we woke up, we weren't sure if we were going to be able to evacuate, but the situation was getting dire for us, as it is dire for many people on the island. But a helicopter came, they were able to evacuate us, and we made it here to Nassau, and now we are able to start of we've experienced. I believe right now you're seeing video of the storm when we started to reach the eye wall of Hurricane Dorian, and it was like nothing we've ever experienced before. We were really hunkering down, and this was the first part sure we had enough food, enough water, and we were as safe as possible.
We apologize for the audio issue there. Jenise, if you can hear us, we're going to try to stay with you as much as we can and just kind of walk you through some of the pictures that we're seeing. This is some aerial views, some of the first images that have come out of the Abacos and the Bahamas, Grand Bahama Island. If we have Jenise back, please let me know so that we can reconnect with her. But these are just some of the conditions that we have seen. So what we're looking at right now, Jenise, just some aerial views of the Abacos here, that this area has been completely destroyed.
Yeah, it was hard to watch. So when we jumped on our helicopter, we sort of did a wrap around the island. And it was just, as you see from these images, to be quite honest with you, I am never at a loss for words, and I'm having a hard time even finding the right words to describe what we were looking at and what you are looking at right now. So we were really hunkered down in our resort, and we were only able to really see the damage from our resort. The reason why we didn't go into town was because the roads were impassable, and it also was a situation that just wasn't safe for us. As what happens in many storms, you know, there's a lot of looting that goes on, so we felt it was safe to just stay in our resort. But when we got on this helicopter and we got to really fly around and see the damage, that is when it really hit us just how bad it was. This was definitely one of the worst storms. I'm sure that once the numbers start to come out, this will be one of the worst storms in history. But as you can see from these images, there are communities that cease to exist. There used to be these little neighborhoods all around the island, and you can see from those images that some of those neighborhoods just don't exist anymore. The main supermarket in town, and this is so important because Maxwell's Supermarket is the main supermarket for Marsh Harbour. They had plenty of supplies for the residents of Marsh Harbour, but when we flew by it today, the roof was completely torn off. So all this food and water that they had, that they were ready to give out to residents once the storm passed through, that is not going to happen anymore. Restaurants gone, businesses gone, and the homes that are still left standing, there is still damage to those homes, whether it is that they don't have a roof anymore or they have water damage. I did not see, at least from this perspective, that bird's eye view, one building, one home that did not sustain damage from Hurricane Dorian.
Jenise, were you guys anywhere near the town clinic? We were getting word that many of the people who were very injured were taken there to be treated, but we also know that they were using that as sort of another shelter.
Yeah, that's right, Nicole, and that's becoming a big problem. So the medical center that they have in town, they started bringing people in. Obviously, they needed to be treated for a variety of injuries, and some of those injuries were very severe. But what happened is that a lot of people started using this center as a shelter because they don't have anywhere to go. Some of these people literally spent Dorian hiding under mattresses. They rode out the storm under no structures. So when the weather sort of got a little better, never really got better, but just enough where people could walk. They started walking on foot to this medical center, but they are overcrowded right now. So we do know that the Coast Guard is lending a hand. They have been taking people from this medical center, the ones who really need that medical attention, and they are taking them to Nassau. And actually, since we are here in Nassau, we are seeing a lot of Coast Guard. We're seeing a lot of volunteer groups trying to get to Marsh Harbour to aid these people, because when I tell you this is a humanitarian issue, it really is a humanitarian issue, because food is needed, water is needed. There were people in our own hotel that needed water and asked for water, and then you get into this survival mode of you want to help people, but at the same time you have to conserve what you have as well. It was a situation that I've never been in, and I can't even imagine what it's going to be like for the people who are still there and will be there for weeks, months to come.
And like you said, for us here too, sometimes we're at a loss for words. Jenise, some of the video that we're looking at right now is of you in the gym. I guess you guys were in there just trying to do a report from in the gym, and we kind of saw one of maybe an employee trying to close the door. Can you talk to us about what happened there?
Yeah, so the door kept flapping open during the eye wall, and it got very scary at times. So that man you see in the video, that is David with Marine Max. He works at the resort, but works with the boats there. He really was our savior. I have to give him a shout out, because when I say he saved our lives, that's not me exaggerating. He came in with that rope to close the door, because Brian, Eli, my photographer, and I had to hold that door down for really 10 minutes during the storm, because we knew that if we let go, the storm would fly, and then we would have this open space where the wind and the rain would come in. So thankfully, he's a yacht guy. He knows how to handle these things. He tied it down, but he even went above and beyond, because when the eye was over us and we had that moment of quiet, which is always so eerie, and we were able to do a phone interview with both of you.
But she's there living in it, and it is just undescribable. But that's why we want to hear from her words.
Oh, yeah, the destruction is just outstanding. It's just astonishing, really. And to be quite honest with you, we walked around the first few days to get a look at the damage, but it's just unbelievable. A lot of homes just ceased to exist. A lot of roofs have flown off of homes. There's actually a community that's right next to the hotel that we're staying at, where there's very nice homes. It's a gated community, so these are very well-structured homes, and a lot of them just didn't make it, and the ones that did make it definitely are dealing with a lot of flooding inside of their homes. So many people had to evacuate. A lot of people here at the hotel trying to seek refuge because they really had nowhere else to go. As far as trees, as we always see in hurricanes, it's really hard to even see one. The debris is just crazy, because as we're walking around, we literally have to dodge debris. We have to make sure that we're not stepping on anything. There's a lot of panels from homes that flew off, and of course there are a lot of nails poking out, and that's been an injury that we've heard about a lot at the resort. A lot of people accidentally stepping on these nails that are just open. So as we're walking around, we have to be extra careful. All the boats that were in the dock are now on land. They're just completely destroyed. Any car that was here also destroyed. We had a car. We had rented a car. Huge. Just wooden panel just completely smashed the windshield, and this is really just such a small portion of the damage. We have not gone into town. Obviously, we're not able to because we don't have a car, and going on foot would just be a bit too dangerous for us. But we do know from people who have gone out to the town, they've told us that really there's almost nothing left. This restaurant owner that I spoke to on Saturday, I believe the piece maybe began during one of the morning shows, he owns the Snappers, and we had talked about in the piece how he was hoping that his restaurant would be able to hold the storm, but we were told that it did not hold up. We know that that restaurant got completely destroyed. We know the main supermarket in town, we don't know the damage there. Hopefully not too bad, because that's really a lifeline for so many people on the island, is that supermarket where they were fully stocked and they were ready for the aftermath of the storm. But since we're still dealing with the storm, nobody could really get to anywhere. I've seen people walking on foot just desperate for shelter. It's such an unbelievable sight to see people walking around just with a book bag and barefoot. Some people holding pets or holding their children, just trying to find a place to seek refuge because the storm is still here. There are people who are still trying to the storm. As a matter of fact, some people ran into cars and rode out storms in cars because their homes got flooded, and they got into their cars and just hoped for the best. We do know, as I'm sure you've reported, the Prime Minister had reported 5 people dead, and there have been numerous rescues, and even he said that he's never seen destruction like this before, and I can say I've never seen destruction like this before. On the ground, it looks like a war zone. Obviously for us news crew, we have plenty of food and water, so that is great for us, but no electricity, no running water. We don't have showers and all of that stuff as is expected during a storm. We're consolidated with our partners at ABC News, so we all got together, we're huddled together, and kind of put our food together as well. So lucky to have their partners with ABC, but we're hanging in there. But hearing Julie say that it's not over yet, I can't believe it. We all woke up this morning and thought, I can't believe the storm is still impacting us.
And that is firsthand this morning from Jenise Fernandez.
Brian Norcross told us about how the wind was coming from the south, and Brian and I realized that was exactly where the water was coming from. So we knew we had to get out, and David actually allowed us to go into his room on the 2nd floor because we couldn't get into our hotel rooms, but he was able to get into his room, and we rode out the storm in his room, and it worked out for us because it was facing north. The wind was coming from the south. And even though the building was shaking and we saw lots of things happening, this might sound strange, but we actually kept the door open. And the reason why we did that was because, again, the wind was coming from the south, so we were facing a direction where we knew debris wasn't going to fly in. But we did that to relieve pressure. Our ears were popping, and if you kept your door shut, most likely your door flew off or your window did. There needed to be some of that relief of pressure. So yes, he really was our savior in so many ways. And we rode out the storm in his room, and we actually had to spend the night in his room because we had nowhere to go. And so many people still have nowhere to go.
Jenise, just listening to your accounts, we have Betty with us here now. I'm going to bring Betty in so that she can talk to you a minute.
Hi, Jenise. So good to see your face. I'm glad you're okay.
Hey, Betty.
It's good to see you. When you were in that room and going through the back part of that eye wall, you had that moment where you were in the eye, we were doing live shots with you, and then you went through the other part of the storm. How was that in comparison to the front part?
I personally felt the back part was worse than the front part. Maybe it was the direction we were facing, but I felt that the back part was stronger. That's when I really started to see those roofs being flown off. That's when we started to see the surge. And so the surge had already happened from the front part of the eye. But then when the second part came through, it started to come up even more and more. I felt it was stronger. I felt the wind was a lot more powerful. I really felt those, you could really see the gust. It's the best way to describe it is that you see these strong structures, whether it's a roof, whether it's a balcony, whether it's a car, these things that are very heavy. And the way that the wind was able to lift these things like it was just paper. It looked like a paper in the air just flying. It was just crazy. And then one thing, the shutters. So some of the building had those actual shutters that you screw in. We do this all the time in South Florida. And you think those shutters are going to hold. The wind actually ripped those shutters off. So even those shutters that we all do when we preparing for a storm, the accordions or just screwing it in, a Cat 5 can rip that off. I didn't know that could happen. I truly did not. But this was something else.
Jenise, curiously, we saw where you had dinner the night before, the Snappers restaurant. We also saw that 2x4 that went through the rental car that you talked about. Which image for you, as you were surveying the damage, stood out most for you?
Oh, that's a great question. For me, the thing that just completely shocked me was honestly the restaurant, and that restaurant was actually the restaurant at the hotel. And the reason why that one got me was because I was sitting there a couple hours before. We were there the night before. We actually had dinner with our partners at ABC News. We had a nice meal. It was a beautiful restaurant. It looked like a very sound structure. But when you get this idea of, I was just here, I was sitting here not even 24 hours ago, and now it's gone. It hits you that if you were there in that spot, in that moment, you wouldn't have made it. And another image that got me, which we do have footage of, but I don't know if we're able to show it. But when we were doing live shots in the morning on Sunday, we were under this awning that felt very safe. And we realized after the storm, that awning completely collapsed and that part of the building was just gone. So that was another moment of thinking, I did a live shot here in the morning, and if we didn't run into that room when the eye came when we did, it would have collapsed on us. And that's not us exaggerating. This is what happened. And so I was just walking around and thinking about, these are the places that I was at. These are the people that I've spoken to. You can't believe it. You really can't. And when I say that we went into survival mode, we really did. It became a situation of, we got to make sure we get out of the storm, we make it through the storm.
Oh my gosh.
Jenise, it's Brian. When you first experienced that storm surge, what did you think? People tell me that it just surprises them. They didn't think the water could come like that and be like that and cover so much area. Is that how you felt about the water? Was it surprising to you?
In a way it was, and in a way it wasn't. I used to report in Louisiana, and in Louisiana they dealt with lots of flooding. So I've seen significant flooding. I've seen what can happen in certain situations and how certain towns are positioned, what happens when water comes through. But what surprised me about the storm surge was the rushing water. Mm-hmm. It literally looked like rapids. I always just expected it to be just flooding, but it's the way that the surge pushes through that creates that rapids, and that's where we saw people literally stuck in the rapids. So it was almost like being stuck in a rip current. We talked about this family, which we do have video of, and we have an interview with them. And once we're able to turn that around, of course, we're going to show you another one of those stories that was so interesting for us. I believe it was on Saturday. We were just doing a live shot outside of the resort, and we met this lovely family of four, a father, a mother, and two daughters. And we just struck a conversation with them. They talked about how they watched Local 10. We said hello. And then while I was actually on the phone with you on Sunday, we heard people yelling for help. Well, it was that family yelling for help, and they got stuck in that current, and thankfully they were rescued. And they finally made it to the hotel bunker, and they were just completely soaked. We spoke to the two young girls. They were really shocked at that point. They couldn't believe it. But they actually live in a very nice community that's actually right next to the resort. So we're not talking about a house that's not built for this. The homes on the island, yes, there are some homes that may not be as structurally sound, but there are homes that are very structurally sound, and they didn't make it. And this family lived in a very secure home. They felt confident riding out the storm, and they had to start swimming because the water just reached their home, and thankfully they were rescued. But I know that there were multiple rescues, and I can only imagine all of those rescues and the people who may still be trapped inside their homes.
Which brings me to my next question, Jenise. There's a healthy fear that people could still be trying to get out from being surrounded by high flood waters, and also could still be trapped in their homes as we speak, and there's no one who's able to get to them because there's so much debris that's on the roadways and the Abacos.
Yeah, that's definitely a situation that is going on right now. We do know that they are doing a very good job right now of clearing that debris. So today was a turnaround for sure. It was just Sunday and Monday. Nothing could really be done because we were still very much in the storm. The storm was relentless. But today, a bit better conditions. So they started to clear the roadway, which is great because that means that people are starting to get around. But we even had a police officer come to our condo that we were staying at because he heard that there was a news crew and he wanted to make sure we were okay. And he told us that he walked on foot from the command center, and that was about an 80-minute walk because he couldn't drive. There was no car that he could take. But the Coast Guard, we've seen lots of choppers today flying around the island and making those landings. So they're doing that assessment, seeing who needs help, and they're getting out there and they're trying to help those people. I don't know how many rescues, but I would imagine there are probably still people inside their homes who can't get out or who simply don't want to get out because they don't know what the situation is like around the town. One thing I can tell you that was pretty scary for us, to be quite honest with you. When you're in a situation like this, you have to understand that people get desperate. And on the ground there, I can understand the desperation. When you need food, you need water, everybody's in the survival mode. But we were seeing a lot of people walking around barefoot with bags, and they were trying to break into rooms at the hotel. Whether there were people inside those rooms or not, I don't know, but they were trying to find shelter. They were that desperate for shelter. Actually, a couple of times we heard knocks on our own door of people asking if there was anyone inside and asking if there were any rooms available. And we know that these are people who need shelter, and obviously we understand that need, but for us as a crew, it's a bit frightening. We're in a place where we're obviously not home, communication is limited, and it's hard to even contact police. So thankfully we didn't run into a dangerous situation, but there were a lot of people walking around, and I can only tell you that when something like this happens, people get desperate and things happen, and sometimes those things turn dangerous.
Jenise, before we let you go, at what point would you say your fear sort of let up and you started to feel a little bit better, you and Brian, both of you together?
Honestly, once on Sunday, we completely lost communication with everyone, and I started to feel better Monday morning when we finally got that satellite signal from our sat phone and we were able to make contact with everyone back at the station. That's when I felt better, because I was just worried that we wouldn't be able to communicate for days. We obviously have that satellite phone, but you have to understand you need clear sky for that. So if you're in the middle of a hurricane, you can't really make calls out of the satellite phone because the rain and the wind is blocking that connection. So once we had those moments where we were able to make connection with all of you back home, that's when we felt better, because we felt at least, first of all, everyone knew we were okay. Our families knew we were okay. I know when I spoke on the phone with my mother and father, my dad's a tough guy, and I could hear his voice cracking when I called him Monday morning, and he said, we did not sleep all night. We were so worried. I know Christy Kruger called my mom to try to calm her down a little bit. I know Kristen, Brian's wife, was very worried as well, and she's tough. And she was worried. So once we were able to make contact and we knew that our families knew we were okay, the station knew we were okay, and as you know, we work for a great company, and our bosses worked nonstop to make sure we got off that island as quickly as possible, and they did that.
Yes.
And while I have you on air, I do want to say a big thank you to our managers for doing that, for getting us off the island, for getting us to safe ground. And I want to thank Mike Fernandez. He was the one who chartered this helicopter.
We're going to be checking back in with you
And
very shortly.
Interestingly enough,
we're going to be checking back in with you very shortly. Thank you, though. Thank you for all of your work.
We'll be back at 10 o'clock.